Okay, so let's move on. As I mentioned in the agenda, Lance and I, well, I guess I should introduce myself because there's folks on here that don't know me. So my name is Jody Foutch. I'm the technical agronomist for DeKalb and Asgrow in eastern Missouri, and Lance is my counterpart in southeast Iowa. We're going to just talk about the XtendFlex soybean platform and kind of where we're at and what we've seen to date with respect to Asgrow XtendFlex. So but before I get into that, I want to just talk a little bit. I've used this study quite a bit over the last few years, several years. And granted, this is, from a few years ago, but I think the story that this tells is relevant, for us today, even though the data is from a few years back. And this is a USDA study that really talks about the impact of driving yield and what that increased yield, what kind of impact that has on net farm income. And so I know this is a really busy graph, but really what I want you to focus on are those bars at the bottom. So the green bar represents what the net farm income was for that particular year. And then they do a little bit of estimation. The light green bar is what net farm income would be at 110, so a 10% yield increase, and then what it would be at a 10% yield decrease. And so you might think, well, it should be pretty self-explanatory that a 10% increase in yield might lead to a 10% increase in net farm income. But what was really surprising to me, I guess, out of this study was if you look up at the top, a 10% increase in yield improves net farm income by 45%. And so that was a little bit of a shock to me when I saw how much just a little bit of a yield increase can improve our profitability on the farm. So I thought that was pretty interesting and tied in really well with what Dr. Conley just presented over the last 45 minutes about, how do we close that yield gap? And so what if we are, able to close that yield gap a little bit, what does that do to net farm income? And I think this does a really nice job of tying that all together. So I want to talk a little bit about the XtendFlex system, and really you can't talk about XtendFlex without going back a couple years and thinking about what started this ball rolling, and that was really the Roundup Ready Extend system, and that system obviously it's not only a trait platform, but it's the chemistry recommendations that go along with it, and that whole system is really supported by things like Asgrow's industry-leading genetics, obviously trade options. Justin Pollard is going to talk about weed control solutions here in a little bit, and how XtendiMax plays into that. It's how do we use these products to manage disease and risk. So all of those things support that Roundup Ready Extend system. And then you move over to the right-hand side, and you obviously you all are well aware that the first product or the first trait platform out of that was Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans, and I thought it was pretty interesting to see Dr. Conley's yield results and what that Extend platform, how that was doing compared to some of the other platforms in the industry. And what's really exciting is as you take the next step to XtendFlex, what we've seen in our testing anyway with Asgrow is we're adding about 1.8 bushels on top of the Extend platform when we move to our key XtendFlex products. So for those of you that don't know, XtendFlex is basically taking that Extend platform that has tolerance to both Roundup and XtendiMax and bringing in tolerance to Liberty herbicide or glufosinate. So not only are we increasing yield as we move to XtendFlex, but we're also increasing that flexibility from a herbicide standpoint. And Justin Pollard will get into that, pretty extensively here in a few minutes. So I want to just talk about this really quickly. I've mentioned E3, I think, once already, but we did a lot of testing against the E3 platform here in the last few years. And one thing that I guess I realized, or that I discovered as we started testing these products, is we actually kind of tracked what were the competitive products that we were testing against. And you can see those, down here at the bottom. But we also tracked what percent of those products have a similar genetics in one bag versus another. And you can see we tested 46 products across, this is kind of a footprint from Iowa to Missouri to Illinois, 46 products we tested against. And about 40% of those products had genetics that were in multiple brands. So kind of the idea behind this picture, as you can imagine, you kind of put an E3 product in the top of the funnel, and what comes out at the bottom is that same product in multiple brands. And in my opinion, why that's important to you as a grower, we always talk about spreading our risk and risk management. Understanding that you can plant different brands and end up with the same genetics in that bag. That's not doing a great job of spreading your risk. So make sure you understand what you're actually planting from a product standpoint. And the flip side of that coin is when you think about Asgrow, actually Asgrow and DeKalb both, but we're going to focus on Asgrow today, is you put one product in the top of the funnel with Asgrow and you get the exact same product out in the bottom part of the funnel. And that's because Asgrow has 100% exclusive genetics. So if you plant 3 products from Asgrow, you're spreading your risk across those 3 products. Those are 3 completely separate lines of genetics, and they're not showing up in anyone else's bag anywhere in the industry. So it's a great risk management tool. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the growth plan for XtendFlex. So obviously, as you can imagine, we've made substantial investments in the XtendFlex platform and pipeline to deliver products. And I know Lance would probably reiterate this, but as we looked at these plots across Missouri this summer, it didn't matter if we were looking at 30 or 40 bushel yield environments or 60 or 70 bushel environments. We had products that spanned the gamut and had product options for all those yield environments. And the flip side of that coin is it didn't matter if we were in high SDS pressure areas or fields with high phytophthora pressure or tough emergence conditions or whatever it is. The breadth of that portfolio allowed us to see products that performed well in those individual environments. Another thing I want to just mention quickly is when you think about adoption rate. So kind of where we're at from the standpoint of moving forward with XtendFlex, it's going to look pretty similar to where we were with Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans a few years ago. And you can see this chart on the right basically shows the growth pattern of Roundup Ready to Extend. We would expect a very similar pattern with XtendFlex. So, from year 1 to year 2, we basically doubled our acres and our footprint. And then year 2 to year 3, it trailed off a little bit, but obviously still really nice growth. So long story short, we are fully committed to the XtendFlex platform. And I think you're going to see a lot of growth out of this in the next few years. I'm not going to steal Lance's thunder because he's going to talk about this in a few minutes, but we did have a very robust and very expansive testing program this year across multiple different, let's say, testing platforms, whether it's MD plots or research plots that Justin might talk about, or some replicated trials. We did everything we could to get into a lot of different environments from a testing standpoint over the last few years. And just specific to our team, kind of this eastern Missouri and southeast Iowa geography, we are fully committed to moving aggressively towards the Asgrow XtendFlex platform. So I think you'll hear us talk about these products quite a bit over the next several years. So let's just look at the portfolio. So this was a slide from last fall. And so this is kind of looking back, well, from where we are today and kind of looking back. So if you look at those RM groups, we have RM2, RM3, and RM4 kind of highlighted in this box. If you kind of add those up, you can see the brown bars represent the number of Xtend varieties that are in those maturities, and the green bars represent the number of XtendFlex varieties. So you can do the math. Right now, currently, we have about 36 Xtend varieties and about 30 XtendFlex. So, to have that kind of a, robust portfolio in year 1 of a launch, it's really almost unheard of. And we're almost to the point where we have as many XtendFlex varieties as we did Xtend varieties right here at year 1. And then the exciting thing is that in plots next year for planting in 2022, we're adding 14 additional XtendFlex varieties in that 2.5 to 4.5 maturity. So I think it just reinforces what I mentioned earlier about how aggressively we're going to be moving to XtendFlex and what kind of product options you're going to have as a grower for your acres. So with that, I want to turn it over to Lance, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the products.
Hey guys, so Lance Goettsch here, technical agronomist in Southeast Iowa. So to continue on the same subject, like Jody said, we've been testing many products over the last couple years across this geography in Southeast Iowa and Eastern Missouri specifically. This is the list here on the left that shows the key varieties we've tested. The column on the right is showing a more refined list, and it's probably going to be the list of more of the key products, key volume products we'll use into 2021, and expect this list to be refined even more next year as we bring in newer products and we learn more about where the best fit is for these varieties across our geography. So the XtendFlex soybeans came from the same germplasm pool that Xtend came out of. Some match up well with the older varieties, and these are varieties that you guys are familiar with, and some are brand new genetics. And it's not uncommon that we're bringing in new genetic backgrounds. We're doing this all the time, even when we're not transitioning into new trait platforms. We're constantly bringing in new genetics, and that's not a bad thing. But we'll see between that 2.0 and 3.5 maturity group, there isn't a whole lot of overlap from the Xtend moving into the XtendFlex platform, but there is quite a bit of overlap, and you'll be comfortable with knowing that these products between that 3.5 and 4.2 have some genetic overlap with that 3.6x6 through that 4.1x8. So again, it's not a bad thing that there's some overlap here and there. We're constantly bringing in new genetics, and we're really confident in our portfolio right now. Next slide, please. So this is an example here showing that the broad testing we've had just in 2020. It shows all the replicated sites, the market development sites, and the production acres across a portion of Southeast Iowa, Missouri, and some surrounding areas. With all these sites, we're able to learn a lot more about the best place to position these specific varieties. And we'll go into the next slide showing you the yield comparisons of our key XtendFlex soybeans based on by volume compared to all the Enlist varieties in our testing. So when I look at the earlier maturities, so the soybean varieties are listed there on the right, the 2.5 through that 3.3, we're showing a very strong win rate of about 68% across 77 comparisons. And these results are pulled from a 170-mile radius from Ottumwa, Iowa, which is basically the center point of the southeast quarter of Iowa. And we're showing a 1.9 bushel per acre yield advantage over all of our Enlist competitors in these plots. So if we look at it by specific variety, we see that all of our varieties have a very strong yield advantage. And there's a few that stand out more than others in some on average across our plots. But I'll point out that 2.8 XF1. So that you could say is bringing down the average in some instances, but I want to point out that that product is a true tough acre soybean variety. So while it doesn't look great here, that's because it's averaged across all yield environments. But if you tease out this data, you can see that that 2.8 XF1 really does well on the tougher yield environments. And I'll show you in the next slide here. It's a little bit tough to see, but in that top graphic there on the far left, this top one shows with 2.8 XF1 included in the yield data, along with all the other XtendFlex soybeans in the earlier maturity group. You can see that there is a slight positive slope on the tougher soils. And when you move down to that lower graphic, that slope evens out. And as you can see, we're very, very consistent across all yield environments. We have a really great portfolio in this maturity group. From the lower yield environments to the higher yield environments, we have a very strong yield advantage over the E3 competitors. But you can see again with the 2.8 XF1, a slight positive slope in those lower yield environments in that top graphic. And you'll see here after Jody comments on some of the fuller maturities where that 2.8 XF1 fits, and some of these other maturities will tease out too. So Jody, you want to bring it into the fuller maturities?
Sure. So kind of a similar data pull to what Lance showed. It's not similar geography, but a similar presentation here. So this is a little bit more southern approach or data pull based off of the plots that I did and all those plots in Missouri that you saw a few slides ago. So as Lance said, if you look at the right hand side, these are kind of our key volume products and what we're going to be moving forward with pretty aggressively, not only this year but into next year as well. And that group of products compared to their E3 competitors, and this is comparing plus or minus 0.3 RM. It's a 2.5 bushel advantage, 62% win rate, and about 380 comparisons. So a pretty robust data set here with our key XtendFlex products. Similar to what Lance has just shown, if you look at this by product, you can see a range from a performance advantage, a range of just under 1 bushel to a range upwards of 4 bushel or a little over. So obviously, depending on product and environment, you're going to see different performance. But I think the positive thing is, across the board, our key volume products that we have to sell are doing well versus the competitive products. And then similar to what Lance showed, just in case you haven't seen these before, just a little, I guess, frame of reference. This is really looking at how these products perform in different yield environments. And you can see it start down at 40 bushels on the low end, up to the mid 70s on the top end. And you can see this is how XtendFlex is performing versus E3 across environments. So obviously from about 74 bushels down, we have a yield advantage. You get out to those mid 70s to 77, 78, and it's more of a push. But I think the vast majority of what we farm here in Missouri is going to fall into those those yield ranges where we see a really nice yield advantage for XtendFlex over the E3 competitors. So the last thing I want to talk about, and then I'll turn it over to Lance to kind of finish things up. And we kind of alluded to this earlier, but I just wanted to kind of revisit, where we've been over the last 20 some odd, well, more than 20, 25 years with respect to trait platforms. And oddly enough, I actually started in the industry in right about the time that Roundup Ready soybeans were being launched. And obviously that was an exciting time for all of us or most of us. But when you look back over those different trait platforms, whether it's Roundup Ready soybeans in the 90s or moving into Roundup Ready to yield soybeans, and then obviously the last few years with Xtend soybeans, what I'd like to call your attention to is you look at those products, and I think Asgrow has done a great job of providing market leading products. 3701s back in the day, and then 3803s and 4005s. And now currently 36X6 and 39X7. And I guess the reason I mention this is this should give you a lot of confidence that our history as a brand, we've done a phenomenal job of bringing industry leading products to the market. And now moving into XtendFlex with things like 37XF1s or 38XF1s, or some of those, mid and late twos that Lance has talked about, I think you can expect the same kind of performance moving forward with this new trait platform that we're in the process of launching right now. So really nice story to tell there with the history of Asgrow.
Yeah, so there's two more slides here. There's three main pillars here to the Asgrow soybean brand, and number one is that we have exclusive genetics and we have the best germplasm pool in the world. And on top of that, we have the traits that allow the flexibility for your herbicide program. Whether you're comfortable spraying with Roundup, Liberty, or dicamba, it gives you a lot of flexibility to choose how to control your weeds and protect your yield. And in the end, building on those two bottom pillars, you're going to get the best yield options for your for your fields and for your farmers. We're very confident and we're very excited in the XtendFlex program. And if you move into the next slide, you see that we have some general recommendations for you on where to place these soybean varieties. We have three main groups here. We're pretty excited that most of our products are very broadly adapted and can basically be placed anywhere. There's a couple soybean varieties that lean a little bit more towards the tough acre products, that being the 2.5, 2.8, and 3.9 XF1. And then we have a couple varieties that tend to lean more towards your more productive soils, and that's the 2.7 and the 3.6 XF1. But I also caution you, this is a general recommendation. So when we get into the more specifics, work with your TA or FSR for specific positioning. But this is a good general place to start on these products and a start for positioning. So this was just a brief overview of all the products. We took a high level approach because we have people joining us that are all the way in the mid twos, all the way up to the mid fours, and we didn't want to bore anyone with a lot of in-depth data on a specific product. So if you guys have any specific questions on specific products or positioning, feel free to reach out to any of the FSRs or TAs, and we'll work with you on helping you position a specific variety.